Many religions in the world emphasize celibacy. Is there any real basis for considering celibacy important in spirituality? Human beings generally are driven by an insecurity. This basic insecurity of existence results from identification with a particular self and the fear of death or destruction of this self. Real spirituality is transcendence of this root fear as well as insecurity feeling. And the reproductive instinct is a direct result of this insecurity, because I am going to die, therefore I must replicate myself. That is the basis for the sex urge. So a really spiritual person who has transcended the root identification with a limited self and consequently has no feelings of insecurity and no fear, experiences no need to replicate himself. Therefore he has no sex drive, or he has a sex drive under his control, or he has only a very small degree of the sex drive. This is the theory. And also a spiritual person has no aggression, and aggression is associated with sex. Both the centers of aggression and sex are close together in the brain for most species. So the right kind of sex behavior or lack of it for a spiritual person should come from the lack of identification and consequent absence of insecurity and fear. But the trouble starts when in modern times religious positions involve considerable authority and power. For example, a person becomes a priest or a monk. So the ordinary public gives considerable attention to such persons. They are adored and respected, and the man who puts on a robe and wears some kind of uniform feels distinguished and very important. And when the priest becomes a bishop, he wears very gorgeous clothes, and he is considered to be more important. We know from experience that when a person feels that he is holding a lot of power, his sexuality increases. For example, kings, for example, all over the world traditionally had several wives. They may have one formal queen and several sub-queens, and then they may have several other wives and a large number of concubines. Solomon was supposed to be a very wise king, but he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Dasharatha, father of Sri Rama, in Ramayana, had 3 queens, Pattamahishis, and 300 wives. And we know that in Africa, tribal chiefs had countless wives. So whenever a person earns a lot of money or comes to a position of power, he experiences an exaggerated need for reproduction. Even among animals, this is noted. In many animals, only the leader mates or the dominant males mate. Those who fail in competition do not experience any need to copulate or reproduce. So one's position and power in society increases the sex need. So a truly spiritual person should not have an ego or self-importance. If he develops a feeling of self-importance, he is not a truly spiritual person. A truly spiritual person should not have the need for name and fame, or for attention or admiration from people. But unfortunately, most religions are lay institutions, though they have a pretense of being spiritual, and ordinary people are appointed in powerful positions, and they become victims of this, and they experience considerable sex drive, which they are unable to satisfy. And this gives rise to perversions and all kinds of criminal sex behavior. So therefore, special care has to be taken in selecting people for religious positions involving celibacy. And also it should be considered whether celibacy should be made mandatory for priests and even monks, because forced celibacy is damaging to the person, and in the long run it can be harmful for the society also. Another very important question is with regard to the use of sex for spirituality. In India, this has been called the tantric sex. Several books have been written about sex as a means for superconsciousness. The fertility cult has been there in religion for a very long time, even from primitive times. The mother goddess concept, increasing the number of the group or the tribe, has been very important. You need more people to fight, to hunt, to cultivate crops, and so on. So reproduction was very important in the ancient times, and there used to be ceremonies for increasing fertility. But this is different from the actual use of sex as a means for enlightenment. This actual tantric use of sex developed in India around the 3rd century AD. At that time, Buddhism was a very popular religion. Both Jainism and Buddhism originally stressed the importance of celibacy for spirituality. Monks were supposed to be celibate. Most of the monks in Buddhism came from the Kshatriya community, because Buddha himself was a Kshatriya, at least his father was a Kshatriya. And these Kshatriya monks were very aggressive people basically, and aggression goes with sex drive. These monks had a very strong urge to be spiritual. At the same time, they had a strong biological need for sexual activity also. This led to their supposition that through sex you can reach enlightenment. And even Buddha himself, or the Buddhist statue itself, was used as an icon for sex. That is the Buddha and the Tara image. That is Buddha sitting and Tara sitting on his lap. this image was used in tantric rituals, and then this tantric Buddhism got coupled with Tibetan religion, the born religion of Tibet, and this gave rise to a whole lot of practices like Kundalini Yoga, Sri Vidya, and Tantra, Tantric Yoga, and this became very popular. It started in the Bihar, Bengal region, but it spread all over India. Many gurus of Tantra Yoga were women, and they came to be called Dakini, and this created a lot of social problems because sex became very much associated with spirituality, and then the traditional idea that sex ought to be controlled for spirituality gradually weakened. So many wise people rose against this, and this gradually led to the downfall of Buddhism itself. Now our main question is, what really happens when you try to couple the religious attitude or the spiritual attitude with sex? The theory says that if you start considering the sex act itself as an act of worship, the sex drive itself will gradually disappear. So you transcend sex by using the spiritual attitude. That's the theory. But later on, many people pointed out that this does not really happen, that this is a very futile attempt on the part of a yogi to attempt to transcend the sex through indulgence. It is just like saying that you take alcohol with a spiritual attitude and you get over the craving for alcohol or any addiction for that matter. If you spiritualize the addiction, it will disappear. But it is very unlikely that this happens. The more you indulge, the greater will be the addiction, because normal sex has to follow a biologically programmed path involving several stages, and any deviation from the biological pattern is likely to lead to compulsions and obsessions and not transcendence.